Okay, I've got a really cool review here. This is for the CYCPLUS, and the goal of this unit is actually to become a replacement to the CO2 cartridges we normally use while cycling. And I'm going to show you how this works. I'm going to put it to the test. And unfortunately with the GoPro I was using, somehow it sounds like it's recording underwater, so I'm having to do a voiceover here. And hopefully this all matches. So yeah, the unit's really cool, really well built. You can do Presta and Schrader valve. The USB-C port here, this is quite interesting. This is where the air intake is from. And I'm going to show you the instruction manual here in a second. I've got a screenshot. I'm going to show you the tyre pressures it can inflate up to. But the main reason for the shroud, the silicone case, is they say the unit can get so hot that it's kind of there for your protection. Actually trying it out, we'll see a bit later, it doesn't actually get that hot. It's quite cool to the touch still. And it's not that loud, but I am doing this outside because I picked up a similar sort of unit off Amazon and it actually caught on fire inside. So I definitely thought, let's take it to the outside studio. Over here we can see the tyre pressures. So I'm running a 25mm tyre and I'm going to inflate it to roughly 80 psi. Normally I ride around 90. But as we can see here, it reckons it can inflate it twice. So the unit itself will take about 20 minutes to charge up via USB-C. Over here right now, I'm just going to quickly show you that you can swap out from Presta to Schrader. Really easy to do. Just unscrew it, swap it around, and I hope you can see it here in the video. But what you'll do is have the smaller part facing the unit itself, the screw bit here. So that is for Presta, and if it's the wider hole, then that is for Schrader. So really easy to do. Again, you can do this in seconds, but I imagine it's one of those jobs where once you've done it once, you're probably never going to use it again, but really good to know that it can do both. I can't remember if it's in here or not with the footage, but it also includes some other bits inside the kit, so it looks like perhaps you could use this for like a football or some other inflatable stuff if you wanted, but primarily this is for bikes. And yeah, honestly, it's a really cool unit. I've started using this and I've taken it with me on a few rides now, just as a backup really. And it's been really handy. So now we're in the outside studio here, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how this works. I'm going to be quiet for a minute so you can hear how loud this unit is. So as you can see, the unit itself isn't very noisy. It's actually quite quiet. Or rather, if you haven't used one of these sort of external pumps before, it's relatively quiet. And yeah, I'm just going to jump over here and do the front wheel as well. And there's something I noticed about these, and I'm going to save it for the end here as well, but it struck me as almost that I couldn't quite get like a perfect seal with it. I had to kind of play around a little bit. You could almost hear air just hissing out ever so slightly. So once I kind of had it at the right angle, it inflated much better. Sounds a bit weird, but it's just like you had to hold it at this sort of perfect angle to get the air going in without hearing this like slight hiss. It wasn't much, and to be honest, when you see how small this unit actually is, it's just impressive it can even inflate these up. For something so small, it's not getting particularly hot. Having used, I mentioned one about catching on fire, and this is one designed for cars. It's this huge big thing, and I was using it indoors, put it on my bike, and it got to a point roughly about sort of 60 psi. So there's this kind of low little pop, and suddenly grey smoke everywhere. So really not fun. I was genuinely, when using this, I was genuinely fearing that this thing might actually catch on fire. So I'm really glad to hear that it didn't, and you can see here, obviously it doesn't, but truly it is a really cool little device. A little bit pricey. I picked this up for roughly $59. It's part of an Indiegogo project. I saw it from Peak Talk actually. He's the one who did a review on it. But I believe now it retails for around $80. So if you are in the market for something like this, perhaps it's something worth getting. Now, this is where things get quite funny. A little bit warm. Jeez. Okay, note to self, that is really hot. Okay, I haven't burnt myself, but that is really quite hot. Now, what did kind of freak me out a little bit is there's a little bit of a smell of burning electronics. It's just a tiny whiff, but this thing did come up. If I press it, you can see that's red, so that's saying, okay, you need to charge this now. But it's done 2 tires, so what we're going to do now, I'm actually going to let that cool down. That is just way too hot for me. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get the track stand on there and just work out exactly what it's been inflated up to. Okay, so checking the rear tyre here, we've managed to inflate it to 60 psi. And in a moment, we're going to check the front one here, and it got to roughly 50 psi. So not quite the 80 we were aiming for, but again, I kind of touched on, was it that sort of perfect seal that was missing? There was a slight hiss of air, like it just hadn't quite made the perfect seal. If you held it in like just the right position, you wouldn't hear that hiss, but it didn't sound like it would be enough to leave such a dramatic change in the pressure. So we were expecting 80 and we got 50 in this case. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's hard to say. And this is where it's become quite hard to actually review this device. Who's it actually for? Is it for roadies? Is it for mountain bikers, gravel riders? The whole goal of this being to replace the CO2 cartridges. I can see this being really practical in winter. The fact all you have to do is unscrew the valve cap, put this on, and press a button, so you don't have to worry about freezing your fingers with the CO2 cartridges. For some people like myself, I sometimes freak out a little bit when using CO2, just because in my mind I'm thinking there's like 160 psi worth of CO2 in here. I sometimes worry about, could I do something really stupid? Is it going to go off with a pop? And the fact it can get so cold, I know you can get those little shrouds you can put around the canister themselves, but yeah, it does worry me a little bit. And I imagine if you are quite conscious about your carbon footprint, the fact you're effectively releasing CO2 into the environment, it's up to you. This is a nifty little unit that is reusable. And the fact I was thinking sort of use case here was, for example, on a cafe stop, that you could go out, I'm sure someone there is going to have a USB-C charger. I'm sure you could go there and perhaps use it and just recharge your unit. So it's good to go again. Whereas with CO2, once it's used, that's it. And it sometimes feels a bit weird having some CO2 left in a canister. Like, how do you use it later? You have to kind of expel it or use it up. The only thing that would have really made this unit fantastic, and maybe this is a feature request going into the future, but it would have been nice to have had some sort of digital pressure gauge built in. Now, I had one of those Topeak ones where you could put it on the tyre, but the problem was as soon as you put it on, it would let the air out, so the pressure would always kind of be reading downwards as you were using it. But with this, it would have been cool if it had maybe some sort of set pressure or something you could kind of program in there. For example, maybe say, hey, I want it set to 50 psi, 80 or whatever, or even just go up in increments of 10, perhaps have that LED flash and say, okay, well, we're going to flash blue every time it goes up 10 psi, so I can count 8 of them and I'd know where my tyre pressure is. But in a pinch here, this was quick. And like I say, I've carried it with me on a few bike rides, touch wood. I haven't needed to use it yet. But just that sort of reusability, it's so small, it's so lightweight, I think it's fantastic. Now I appreciate I got this at a slightly cheaper price point. And I'm still kind of on the fence if this is a gimmick, because one of the big things I really dislike about cycling at the moment is just the amount of tech you have to charge. And this thing could leave you with egg on your face when you go out there and suddenly forget that you haven't charged this unit up. You've charged your lights, your Varia, bike computer, and you've forgotten to charge your little inflator here. I feel like this is probably one of those things where you'd say take this and a CO2, but then you're kind of defeating the purpose. As long as you remember to charge this up, I think it's fantastic. You can just bring it with you, so lightweight, throw it in your jersey. I suppose, again, one of the big differences here is CO2, you could easily inflate this up to like 120 psi, but I'd need 2 CO2 cartridges. With this, a couple of minutes at the roadside here, both tyres are inflated up, enough to at least get me home. Race conditions or something, I'd probably say, yeah, go CO2. So I'm really mixed about this. Is it a good unit? Is it a bad one? It's really hard to say. And I'm sure with now this is out, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of these popping up on like AliExpress. So this idea is probably going to become really mainstream. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this? I've seen a few YouTubers review this. They've all said it's pretty good. I would concur. It's pretty nifty. But at the sort of price point it's at and performance-wise, it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag. I've seen some people claiming they've only been able to place up one tyre on a mountain bike with this. So again, it does kind of seem like, hey, maybe CO2 is the way to go, but I imagine with all the feedback from all those YouTubers and everyone using it, I imagine version 2 of this is probably going to be really good. Bigger battery, maybe some sort of digital pressure gauge, and perhaps something that would have made it a little bit quicker to inflate and possibly allow more air in. I wouldn't have mind if there was a sort of air intake on here. Rather than trying to use that small USB-C port, it's very innovative, but I did wonder about perhaps having a bigger air intake. With all that said and done, let's wrap up the video here. Let me know your thoughts below. Happy cycling, and I look forward to catching you in the next one. Take care.